We didn't leave anybody on their sofa thinking, why didn't they ask that? Or what was that about?
Absolutely.
And that is the core of everything I do. You know, you often talk about how Ron Dennis and the way that the McLaren team was when you worked with it shaped your way of thinking and your approach, which stayed with you for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
And I feel a bit like that as well.
From Ron or
from
Formula
McLaren.
One? From McLaren. Okay.
Yeah, and what Ron did with it.
Mm-hmm. Hi, I'm Marc Priestley. I spent almost a decade at the McLaren Formula One team alongside inspirational people such as Kimi Raikkonen, Lewis Hamilton, Fernando Alonso, but also people like Adrian Newey and Ron Dennis. I created the Pitlane Life Lessons Podcast to share many of those things that I've learnt with you to help you to think about the challenges in your life a little bit more like a Formula One team might think about them. Enjoy. Hey everyone, welcome back. In today's episode, I have a very, very special guest. The reason he's special is he's just a special kind of guy anyway. It's Ted Kravitz from Sky Sports F1. But it's also special because Ted does not do this kind of thing. There is not another podcast out there, as far as I can look back across the internet, other than his own Sky Sports ones, where he sits and has a conversation in the way that we did today. You're going to hear about cheese, you're going to hear about the aviation industry, but most importantly, you're going to hear some of the insights that Ted has learnt from a near 30-year career across Formula One. You're going to see Ted in a very different light to the way you normally see him on your televisions, and I hope you enjoy the show. Ted,
Hello.
As far as I know, you don't do podcasts other than the one you're contractually obliged to do.
I've got two. I've got two of my own.
Well, the Sky Sports podcast,
yes.
You're all over, obviously. But I couldn't find you anywhere else on the web in terms of a deep, long conversation.
No, I refuse to do them. I've got two of my own. Why do I need to do others?
What are your podcasts?
Thank you very much for the plug. Anyway, hello, everybody. Yes, if you'd like to go over to the Sky Sports F1 podcast feed. So I do one called Ted's Podbook.
Right, yes.
Which is on the Thursday of every Grand Prix weekend. So the thought behind that one was the Notebook is obviously what some people know me for. Excuse me. And I just thought, that's at the end of the weekend. And sometimes I thought, Formula One is the kind of thing that you look forward to, isn't it? It's you have a week off, you think, all those stupid things about it's race week. And then it gets to Thursday. And a lot of the time, you're at the kind of behest or the control of whoever's editing interviews and deciding whether they want to go on Instagram or not, or Twitter. There are no TV programs largely. And I thought there are also no kind of podcasts. So I know what happens, how much happens on the Thursday, the media day, and the stories that come out of there. And I didn't want to be a kind of gatekeeper. I didn't want to be there any gatekeeping, which is largely what kind of Ted's Notebook is all about. Sort of breaking down that sort of gatekeeping thing. And I thought I'd like to tell people about what the mood was in the paddock, whether any drivers said anything new or interesting, whether there are any sort of discussions going on, whether there was a little preview for the weekend. Yeah. Now, so that's Ted's Podbook. It always ends disastrously because I never start it with the actual on-air times. And so at the end of it, you'll always hear me ask somebody, usually, the Bahrain was Nigel from Sky Sports website. It's like, has anyone got the on-air times? So we have to record it off-site because them's the rules.
Yeah.
And I normally start it and I don't have the on-air times, which is stupid because that's what it is. It's a promo, basically.
But you think that's silly. I mean, I worked with Kimi Raikkonen for a long time and I'd be strapping him into the car and he'd ask how many laps it was.
Yeah.
So not everyone's that well prepared.
And what time the race is. Yeah. So that's the idea of the Podbook, is to tell people what's been going on the Thursdays. And then we do a podcast called The F1 Show, which is something that Sky's been doing for a few years, and Simon Lazenby, Bernie Collins, and myself do that more or less every week when we can, when our schedules allow. And so having two podcasts, one of which is just me talking, it seems I don't want to really inflict doing anyone else's podcasts on people.
You've run out of words.
As you're an old colleague and a mate, I was happy to come on yours.
And I'm really grateful. But I was kind of, the reason that the question came I was intrigued as to, because that's all Formula One and it's on a Grand Prix weekend typically. Outside of that, which is where we know you from, outside of the Grand Prix weekend, we don't know much about you. We don't see you. You're rarely on social media. And as I said, I can't find you on any podcasts outside of the Sky Sports Network.
I haven't done any.
And so that's a very deliberate thing. Why?
Yes. Well, I mean, for the reason I just gave of the podcasts, and then I don't do anything else. Well, I mean, I have a sort of slightly different idea about what these things are for. So if you're talking about, if you want to get into specifics of it, Instagram, I like it as a photographic medium. Mm-hmm. So I will put, if I take a particularly what I think is an arty photo or an interesting photo, I'll put it on there. I don't do the Instagram stories because I think you can become a sort of slave to that. Even though if there's the right thing to do, I might do that, but I haven't done for a while. And the other reason I'm too busy doing other stuff. And what else? There's X, which I will use maybe a couple of times a year if I think there's something cool on there. Yeah. Notwithstanding the issues that people have with X at the moment, which I understand. What's the other one? TED Talk. I'm on TED Talk. I'm on TikTok.
Yes.
You not followed me on TikTok?
No, but I'm about to. As soon as we finish this,
I'm TED Talk F1, which I thought I'd just nab the username before somebody else did.
And do you use it?
Yeah, mostly about cheese.
Okay.
Mostly about cheese-related content.
Well, in that we have to interject here with what is your favourite cheese then?
Well, it depends on what I'm trying to sort of prove, really, or what I'm trying to do. I don't really have a favourite cheese. But the last TED Talk I did was buying some cheese in the Bahrain Mall, which has a very good Carrefour, with Anthony Davidson, when we were trying to, first year of the ground effect rules, we were trying to show how different Venturi channels on the floor could work, and why you can't have them just going straight to the back because the floor chokes, apparently, why you have to have them coming from the sort of throat to the bib of the car out to the side, and why some of those floor fences on the edge of the floor, it's like really detailed, why that matters. Yeah. And so I do find there is not any kind of technical element of Formula One that can't be illuminated by not using through the medium of cheese.
Of cheese, yeah.
So whether it's that, or it was the Ferrari scoops a few years ago that looked like the red wax skin of a Baby Bell, which I used for Carlos Sainz.
So true.
And the wedge, the original one was where the wedge was taken out of the floor to cut some downforce in 2021. It was Seb's first year at Aston Martin, which would have been 2021, wasn't it? He was let go over COVID, wasn't he?
That's right.
They split in 2020. And I just thought, when I looked at it, I thought, well, what is it that's actually missing here? And I thought, oh, that looks like a triangle of Gruyere. So it was some aged Gruyere. So that's where the cheese came from. So that's mostly on TED Talk. But I should do some more on TikTok. But I understand what these, I follow it, obviously. I understand what these social media things are for. And more aviation content I should do. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I'd like to do more plane stuff on TikTok.
You're big into your aviation, aren't you?
Yeah, very interested.
Thanks so much for getting this far through today's episode. I would love it if you could interact somehow with the Pitlane Life Lessons podcast by dropping us a like or a comment, a rating, wherever it is you're listening or watching. It really makes a massive difference. Back to the episode. Is the reason, or at least part of the reason, for not being particularly active on some of these social networks and sort of broadcasting yourself deliberately in other mediums beyond Sky, is there an element of that here's the question. Are you a big fan of the fame side of what you do? You've grown in stature over the years in Formula One to be quite a well-known character, of course, within our world. How does that fame sit with you?
It's more just that I don't have the time. As you know, Grand Prix weekends are flat out. They are absolute, for me at least. Yeah. They are flat out. I mean, from going to the venue on a Wednesday, or a Thursday morning. And if you're there Thursday morning, that you are absolutely flat out.
Yeah.
And you do not stop until you get home Sunday. I tell you who realized this early on and who sort of pointed it out to me, even though I kind of knew at the time. It was a chap called Brian Barwick, who was, when I was at ITV F1, working with your other half, and you were at McLaren. Brian Barwick was a very well-known and respected TV executive, later went on to run the Football Association. And it was in the era that TV executives would sometimes come to F1 races. And he wanted to come, and there were some thoughts that he'd have some discussions about stuff. And but he didn't come to very often to races. He was more to be seen at sort of football matches. And he came and he said, "Oh, we'll have a chat. It's big Liverpudlian chap, great guy, moustache, ginger hair." And he said, "Oh, we'll have a chat." And then I'd see him around, and I'd be rushing places with headphones from press conference to practice session and stuff like this. Whenever I passed him in the paddock, he'd be like, "You're busy. I'll catch you later. And then we got back, and it was sort of Sunday morning, and it was like, "Right, Brian, I've got I've got 10 minutes now." He's like, "Well, I don't know, Ted, 10 minutes, it's not very much, you're flat out over a weekend." Sorry about the accent. I like doing accents. Let's talk when we're back in London, because we can't talk at the races. Yeah. You're flat out. And then I thought that was a very interesting observation at that time. He just got it that we are completely flat out. And so, especially myself, who I'm one of the first. I do the pre-show. I mean, I'm one of the only people who does everything.
Yeah, I mean, I remember from working with you at Sky, we'd go home to the hotel and almost always leave you behind with your camera op and a soundy. You were always the last one to leave.
Well, hang on, you were doing the pack up.
No, I mean, when I was at Sky.
Oh, when you were at Sky,
I was with you guys at Sky, we'd get on the coach back to the hotel, minus you.
Yeah, because I was doing the notebook. So I do the pre-show, I do reports into the pre-show, I do the pit lane reporting in the race, and then I do the post-show with the interviews, and then I do the notebook at the end. And so if you think about it, Crofty and Martin does the pre-show and the commentary and the post-show, but he doesn't have his stupid program at the end that I managed to convince myself to do. And Simon doesn't do the race.
Yeah.
The presentation crew don't do the race
in
the middle. So I'm kind of the only one. So I'm just flat out. And I don't really have time to think about any of going back to your question, this fame thing. And then I've got 3 kids, got wife and 3 kids at home. They're, 13, 12, soon to be 14, soon to be 13 and 6. Or she's 7 now. And I just, I've got 1,000 things to do.
Yeah.
And if I need to do things to be known or social media, then I don't know how people have the time.
But I think there's a difference, or I feel like there's a difference between those who actively seek the fame through social media, but then the fame element itself is almost inescapable at times, at least for you. And I know it's, in many regards, Formula One's still a bit niche in some places around the world. So I'm sure you can walk down the street unrecognised for large periods, but people will bump into you and stop you. How does that sit with you, particularly, as you said, you've got kids, you've got a family, you spend most of your time outside of the races, I guess, with the family.
Yeah.
So when somebody wants to drop into your family time with some chat about Formula One on the street, how does that feel?
No, I've got a problem. I mean, it's like, we all have interests. So I love planes and aviation and stuff like that. There are these great guys called the Nomadic Aviation Group, run by Steve and Bob, they're called. Steve Giordano started it. And if I was to run in to Steve or Bob on the street, because I follow all of their stuff and their videos, they do amazing videos on YouTube. The channel's called Cockpit Casual. And they're like Sky Cowboys. I don't mean Sky Sports. I mean they ride the airways,
Yeah.
taking planes from one place to the other and doing crazy routes and stuff that the airlines don't want their own, or their own people don't want to fly the routes or can't. Deliveries, there's not like repossessions like on those programs on the Discovery Channel. But if I was to run into somebody that I follow on social media, or a favorite comedian or actor or something, I'd most of the time I'd probably not say anything, but if I did want to, I'd be, oh, hi, I love your stuff, and they'd be like, oh, great, thanks very much. And that's 99% of the exchanges I have with people.
Yeah, okay.
They don't really want to chat F1. I mean, some do, which is fine if you want. But, if they're kind enough to say, oh, hi, because we're in their living rooms.
Yeah, they feel like you know you.
And we're on their phones. And tablets, and it's only understandable. And I understand it because if I was to see Steve Giordano or someone from Nomadic, which I did actually in Doha Airport, and I went up to them.
You had a fanboy moment.
I did have a fanboy moment. I went. It was Wes and Paul, I think, and I said, "Oh, hi, you guys. I follow you on YouTube. I watch your stuff. I really like it." And they were, thanks very much. And that's what you have to. And
that is spreading the love, isn't it? That's sort of appreciating them for what they do, which I guess is largely what you must get. You're clearly a very well liked character, but I think what sets you aside from a lot of people in the industry, the TV industry that is, and the entertainment industry, is you haven't set out to seek that fame. That seems like a big distinction. You set out following this path of your craft and Formula One as a sport, and fame has been a byproduct. Is that fair? Yeah,
I mean, I wouldn't agree with you that I have fame or that I am famous.
Well, it's perspective, isn't it?
If you watch Formula One, you will probably know who I am.
Yeah,
I've been at it for a while. I'm not Sean Connery.
No, it's all a question of perspective when it comes to that.
He's famous.
But you have people recognise you, and my point is, I think it's a nice thing that you haven't set out to follow that. It's come as a byproduct, and as a result of you just being who you are, which I think is what most people appreciate, particularly about the Notebook show. It's just you being you, and it's great, and that's what I think people love. It's actually very un-Formula One like, isn't it? If you think about it, because Formula One is so regimented in many ways. It's so highly professionalized and it's corporate in lots of ways. And it's not that you're not professional at what you do, because I know you are, but you're just you. Yeah. It's your personality that shines through. And that must mean that when people do recognize you, it's largely positive.
Yeah, I suppose. Yeah. I don't know. I don't think about it that much. No, I think if you think about it that much, I mean, I don't know who does get into Formula One for the fame, but
well, I think people get into broadcasting and social media for the fame, perhaps. But we know it happens.
But it's the job I like.
Yeah,
it's the sport I like. You're absolutely right. I like the craft. I like the being part of a team. That when there's a big story, when we're all firing on all cylinders, then, we can go off air and, I will not know what it's like to win races or a championship as being part of a Formula One team, because heaven knows I'm not going to be employed by a Formula One team, but I can get close to it if we go off air, and we can go off and think, do you know what? That was a great show. We told the story. Yeah. We didn't leave anybody on their sofa thinking, why didn't they ask that? Or what was that about?
Absolutely.
And that is the core of everything I do, is that I do not want any of my viewers who pay, I mean, in all ways, they pay to watch us on Formula One. When I was at ITV, they watch the adverts.
Yeah.
That's a form of paying. When I was at BBC, you pay 170 quid a year for the license fee.
Yeah.
That's also a way of paying. And if you're on Sky Sports, then obviously you're paying for Sky Sports. So, they are our customers. And I do not want to leave any of them with a kind of unanswered question, with a why didn't they ask that? Why didn't they represent me? Because that's what I'm there to do. I'm not there. I don't care what happens. I don't care. I'm not interested in what Andrea Stella personally has to justify. I'm doing it for my customers, for my viewers. And if I can just leave them not feeling like we haven't provided a service, then that's great. Then that's all I'm doing it for, really.
And I think that there's a lot of respect, and I know because I've seen it up close and personal, but there's a lot of respect that you do take that very seriously. I think that absolutely comes across. And it's part of the reason you've been doing this now for, I mean, am I right in thinking you're approaching 30 years? Well, was it 97?
Yeah, 97 was my first year. Not as a presenter, not as a reporter.
But in the sport.
So started in 90s. My first season was 97.
That's incredible.
And then so Murray Walker retired end of 2001.
Yes. And that's when James moved upstairs.
James Allen, who was the pit lane reporter.
Who sat here a few weeks ago.
Did he?
He did.
Oh, hello. He wrote the book really on modern pit reporting, on what the job is. And remains to this day a far better pit reporter than I'll ever be. But in the way, maybe we'll get onto it, in the way that he can just encapsulate a story and drop a little golden nugget of a story in your head to make you understand it. And I will, if I retire at some point, hoping that I've got to James's level, then I'll be happy. But yeah, so he went to be commentator, and they needed at ITV a replacement. And because I'd been in radio reporting and sports reporting, and Brian Barwick gave me a chance, then I started full time in 2002. So what's that now? 28 years. 22.
Yeah. Well, it'll be 30 years in 27.
I'll be in my 30th year, yeah.
Won't it? Of your involvement in this sport. And I think for anyone...
22 years reporting.
Yeah, okay, there you go. You've done the maths.
23.
Yeah,
23.
Yeah.
I've done the maths wrong.
Yeah, don't worry, we'll cut that out. No, we won't. So to have a 30-year career in a sport like Formula One especially, I mean, I did 10 years with the team and then, more since in periphery roles. But I know that what I found is the amazing about Formula One is this incredible set of people that work at such a high level, both at the teams, but also in the infrastructure that goes around it too. You must have met some unbelievably inspirational people over the years. Do any stand out, whether it's drivers, key members of teams, or people like Brian Barwick you've mentioned already? Are there any that stand out having left a really indelible impression on you that have maybe shaped your life? Maybe James Allen's one.
I mean, professionally, they've all, everybody I've worked with really has shaped that kind of thing. So you do tend to divide it, or at least I do, between the TV people and the Formula One people. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, there are so many. Who do you want to, how should we go for?
Well,
first?
Are there any drivers?
Well, let's go for Formula One people. I mean, so, you often talk about how Ron Dennis and the way that the McLaren team was when you work with it shaped your way of thinking and your approach, which has stayed with you for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
And I feel a bit like that as well.
From Ron or from Formula
McLaren.
One? From McLaren.
Yeah.
Okay.
And what Ron did with it.
Mm-hmm.
Because they were always, so growing up, I was always a Senna fan. And so I would devour, racing is my passion of VHS, the series, The Team, it's available on YouTube, that BBC Two did with McLaren.
Amazing behind the scenes documentary. It's all grainy, isn't it now? Yeah. But I only discovered it recently.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, incredible.
Okay. Oh, wow. That must have been an really interesting...
It really is, because I know a lot of the people that are in it.
Yeah.
Some of them are even still there. Wouldn't it be great to do something like that now in the modern era? I mean, Netflix is a version, but nothing like that.
No, I mean, isn't that, not only were they doing Drive to Survive before Drive to Survive, but you could argue that they were doing it in a more insightful way and in a more in-depth way. Obviously, because Netflix has to, or Drive to Survive have to, cover the breadth of all of the teams. But when you're embedded in a team like that, and credit to whoever managed to get Formula One management to okay it, and it's still around, I haven't seen many better documentaries that give you a real idea of what a team is. And McLaren, I'm not he knows, were seen as this kind of, ultra professional, the appliance of science team, that who needs ironically, who needs someone like Adrian Newey, given that they had Adrian Newey,
Yeah.
when you can just apply science to making a car go faster, and that will give you, the same result, but in a sort of logical way. Ultra professional, and maybe the kind of West livery didn't help when they went fully grey, and the Vodafone when it was fully grey and chrome.
Yeah, that's right.
But what that documentary and what the Senna Racing is in my blood VHS growing up showed me is that McLaren are actually a very warm team, a sort of family-oriented team, but with that attention to detail, that professionalism, and that sort of focus on getting the job done that really appealed to me. And as a kid, I liked the numbers of Formula One, so I would scour the newspapers. We're old. I would scour the newspapers for the previous day's qualifying times, and I would go through them thousandth of a second by thousandth of a second and build my own picture up.
How old are you at this point?
Probably 9, 10.
Really? Wow.
And build up my own picture of what happened in that qualifying session.
You were a super geek even back then.
Well, these are formative years for boys, aren't they? And something about boys, actually, that I've written about, that there's something about boys that growing up, I think developmental psychologists have found that boys find comfort in the order of numbers in a different way to girls. I think there's some scientific basis for this. And I certainly found that. I felt comfort in the order of numbers when you're going through adolescence and puberty and you think lots of stuff is going on. Sometimes boys get sort of obsessed with that. And in a way, you find it how many people keep their own notebooks of Formula One, and will write down to the thousandth of a second.
Yeah, I see. Okay,
what happened.
Yeah,
and I still do that. You will hear me in any notebook saying that. Yuki Tsunoda was he missed out on Q3 by 0.003 of a second to Alex Albon or something. And that's because I've looked at the numbers. I've done what I was doing back then. Yeah. So anyway, let's get back off your point. So so McLaren, Ron Dennis.
While we're on that, let's just say when you've watched those documentaries, you've been inspired by Ron and McLaren. Yeah. Then you get to meet him and work with the team years later. How did it compare to what you were when you were growing up?
I mean, the same for Frank Williams, same for Ross Brawn. I just had a sort of huge amount of respect for them, and didn't want to piss them off. Yeah. Mostly because I was a bit scared of Ron.
Yeah.
But
as I think we all.
And knowing that, my new job, I mean, seeing them, so I did 5 years in the paddock before I was a full-time reporter. And for the first 2 years of that, I didn't have a paddock pass. Okay. So I was only in the TV compound. Yeah. I didn't get a sniff of a paddock pass until 99. And by then I would get lent one maybe for a Sunday evening. One of my greatest pleasures was going into the pit lane on Saturday evening and just watching all the teams building up the cars, changing them from qualifying cars to race cars, and just walking up and down the pit lane and seeing that. So, you'd see all the mechanics working. Were you there in 97?
No, 2000 I started.
Yeah. And so, seeing all of that. And so when I would see Frank Williams, Patrick Head, Ron Dennis, latterly Martin Whitmarsh, Peter Sauber, whoever was running Ferrari at the time, Jean Todt, then Dominicali, and then all the rest of it, you'd think, oh, wow. And then when I started reporting, you would kind of, obviously you had an immense amount of respect for all these people. And you would, maybe I sort of pulled punches in terms of, do I ask them the sort of direct question or the cheeky question, even though that's what, you'd find a way of doing it, which would obviously maintain your respect for them, and asking what the person on the sofa watching would want to ask. And I still do that.
Do you still think you have to find that same balance?
Yeah, definitely. 100%.
Because I guess some people would say you're still very respectful, but I think is it fair to say you're brave enough now to push boundaries further with people?
Only when I feel that the answer is not informative is the wrong word.
Complete enough.
No, is maybe not giving the listener or the viewer the credit of, say, memory.
Okay.
So let me give an example of the latest one, or one of the recent ones. It's Christian Horner, where people thought that was a very cheeky question to ask when I asked after the Japanese Grand Prix whether we have a Liam Lawson problem.
Yeah.
Was he still with them? It was only two. No, it was after China. They disposed
just before he got the
boot for Japan.
Yeah.
Despite him knowing Japan. And I said, okay, that's, great. Max is knocking it out the park as he always does. Liam's out. That's right. He'd had two Q1. He'd been last 20th and 20th and 18th. And I said to Christian, who's man I respect hugely, you can't not respect his achievements as team boss, longest serving team boss in Formula One. Yeah. I said, do we have a Liam problem? And he just batted it away with a kind of, oh, well, he's been unlucky, but, it's we'll take a look. And I just thought it was a real gut reaction. And I can remember it word for word, as I can remember most things word for word. And I said, yeah, but hang on, you didn't pay off Checo for this.
Yeah, that's right.
The idea was that you weren't getting the points you needed for the Constructors' Championship. I hadn't written this down. You watched me saying it. It's just a pattern of thought. You weren't getting the points you needed for the Constructors' Championship. You needed a driver to score the championship. You wanted to replace Checo with a driver who you felt was going to be quicker and score more points. You didn't pay off Checo for being in this situation.
Yeah.
Or for this, is what I said. And he kind of gave me a look and then said, well, we'll talk about it after the race. And people thought, well, that was pushing it. But had Christian said, had he given a more fuller answer, I'm not saying it's his fault. I'm just explaining my thought processes. If he'd said, well, yes, I mean, listen, there's absolutely no getting away from that. Liam has not had the results we want. Clearly, it's a long road to go with Liam. He doesn't want to be in 20th. We don't want him to be in 20th. We need him to score the points for the team. This is just memory. Yeah. We all remember why Liam is in that. It wasn't that long ago.
No,
it was
right.
December.
Yeah.
We all remember why he's there. And so, I understand that he's frustrated and we're frustrated. Then, we'll take a look at it. I would have ended the interview there. I would have said, thank you, Christian, see you for the race. And the same with, Andrea Stella, a man also I respect hugely. He will say something like, or I think he did when they didn't manage to beat Max in Japan. And I said, and he said, well, we were sort of managing it and all of that. And I said, yes, but in trying to keep the peace, have you just let Red Bull win quite easily? And he kind of gave me a look. And so to answer your question, look, I have respect for everybody in Formula One. They're there because they're the best in the business. They're the best in the world at what they do. But sitting on the sofa at home, if I'm not asking those questions, then I'm not doing my job properly.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree.
So I have respect for everybody.
Do you think your methods have changed in that, whatever number we've ended up coming up with, 20 plus years of doing this role, in terms of if Christian had said that response to you back in 2002, do you think you'd have pushed it that far?
I don't know. It's a really good question. I'm not sure.
So what's changed? Is it your self-confidence in yourself?
Do you know what? I think the only thing that's changed is that I kind of another great guy who influenced me, Kevin Piper, in ITV F1. He was a great football reporter, presenter on Anglia TV, and he would always say, you've just got to sort of free yourself. He would always talk about his, I'm getting my worms mixed up. He loved the sort of play on words. And even in 2002, my first year of reporting, that was when we had the Schumacher Barrichello Austria cross the line swap.
Yeah.
And if you look at my interview with Ross Brawn after the race, it has the same kind of questioning vibe, but I didn't have my words quite right.
Yeah. Okay.
I think I said, and again, I've been researching it because I've been writing about it recently. I said something like, well, hang on, Rubens had that race won, didn't he? He won it. He had it won fair and square. And Ross said, well, what do you mean he had it fair and square? They weren't racing. We called it off after lap 20 because we were so far ahead of everybody else. We wanted to save the cars. And I was kind of still, what I learned was actually from Sebastian Vettel was to have your head, the importance of having your head clear in the moment, of not being involved in the, excuse me, the kind of reaction and the emotion of what's going on. You need to be completely clear-headed, and that is when you're going to get the best results. And I was so kind of confused about what I'd just seen that I allowed that to maybe not get my question quite right.
That's interesting.
And that's something that I've learned from many other people.
How do you do that? How do you
F1.
get your head clear for the moment?
It's a weird kind of thing. You just sort of almost, like sometimes when a dog comes out of a pond and they kind of go, and they kind of shake the water off.
It's a good analogy.
Because, they're not there.
It's a little reset.
Yeah, a little reset.
Yeah.
Yeah, you do.
So do you actively do that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So case in point, Abu Dhabi 21, we'd all, I think I speak for all of us, that we didn't quite know what we'd just seen.
Yes.
We knew that safety cars didn't normally end that way. And we knew, obviously, from the reaction of Toto, that there was something not right, Michael. But we didn't quite know what it was and what was going on.
Yeah.
So standing there in the gap in the pit lane, I had to kind of do that kind of reset moment. And a kind of, well, what is this, and
just describe what that moment looks like for you, because it could help people.
Well, it doesn't look like the dog coming out the pond.
No, well, that's the image I've got in my head right now. So what's your version of that practically?
You've got two dogs now.
Yes, yeah, and they do exactly that.
They do? Before you get there with a towel.
Exactly right, yeah.
I don't know. I don't watch myself doing it. But is
it a big deep breath? Is it is there anything
myself, that... And I imagine sort of strategists do this when there's a big accident and they are, of course, concerned for the driver involved, but then very, very quickly, probably within about a second and a half, need to think about how that affects their two cars and whether they're going to pit them under the inevitable safety car.
Yeah.
It takes a certain type of weird personality set to not have empathy with people and to think, say, like a Kubica crash against the wall in
Canada.
07. Was 07, wasn't it? Because he won it in 08.
Yeah.
Yeah. It takes a certain cold person, if you're on, say, the McLaren pit wall, to think,
box this lap.
All right, yeah, box this lap. You've got to have a bit of empathy for someone.
Yeah.
And for a strategist, I imagine it's quite difficult having that little mental reset.
Well, in the teams, and I can say this from experience, we are trained to some extent in that, and certainly in McLaren, I know we were in that. And the reason I asked about the deep breath is our version of that. And we went to Olympic coaches and all sorts to have this sort of stuff drummed into us. It was about consciously taking a big deep breath, if you can, with your eyes closed, and a longer out breath than your in breath. That was our method, right? And the idea is in that moment, it does slow your heart rate down a little bit, gives you a moment of hopefully darkness with your eyes closed and just a clarity of thought. And it can take a couple of seconds, but it is just detaching from what went before to what is about to happen next. And I think it's what you're describing, even if you're not doing that.
Well, this is very good. I'm glad you told me. Where's my notebook? I shall write this down.
But so you're doing it anyway. You're doing it anyway.
Well, it's just a shallow breath in.
Effectively, it's a big deep breath.
Right.
But the exhale is longer than the inhale because that, in physiology, that does lower the heart rate slightly.
I'll do that.
But
I will do that.
Well, it sounds like you're doing all right.
Well, I am. You have to clear. You have to go in. If you have you've got enough to think about on TV, like on a race team. It's hard enough as it is. You go in there with your mind full of, must say this, mustn't say that, don't want to upset those people, don't want to upset these people, want to make these points, like, just clear your mind. Was it Vettel? I think Vettel said it about the start. I think I was doing a feature about starts, Or was it about the power of music in Formula One? I think Danny Rick said it about the power of music. He said that's just a way of resetting yourself, of clearing your mind before the start. And I think it was after the Singapore start when Seb went into Kimi and Kimi went into Max.
Yeah.
And I said, I was doing a piece about that, and he was saying, look, you can't think about, am I going to go left? Am I going to go right? You just need to clear your head, let what happens, and then go for it. Someone else who had not an impact on me, but something else I remember, Mika Salo, who would always talk about, and you will know this very well from your affinity and friendship with Kimi Räikkönen, about there's something in Finnish, maybe it was like a laddish culture, about going out for a night on the tiles. Mika called it zeroing yourself.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
He said sometimes it's good to zero yourself.
Well, Mika Häkkinen also had that same
Did
philosophy
quieter,
as did Kimi. Yeah.
In a quieter way, Kimi kind of became kind of known for it. But so that was, I mean, heavens, when did Mika Salo say that to me? Sort of like 2002. Well, I would have been on the telly, so I guess.
But it makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? It makes total sense, because you can imagine, and people use this across, well, all sports, certainly, when there's a big moment. And when I said we worked with Olympic coaches, it was often talking with sprinting coaches when there's an athlete on the start line in a stadium at Olympic final, when the pressure's mounting. Our version of that was a pit stop, for example, a big high pressure pit stop. You've got to find some way to stop all of the noise getting in. And that's what you're talking about. The big moment that's just happened, it's easy to be clouded and confused by that. So you have to have a moment of reset. So I think it's valuable to anybody. Same when you're going into a big job interview or whatever, isn't it? It's any big moment in your life. If you go in without and even the slightest element of preparation, you're compromised. Yeah. And I think that's the point here. You don't want to be compromised as much as possible.
Yeah. It's keeping your mind open. I mean, just to be clear, what Mika Salo was talking about was, because was going out for a night with your lads, with your friends, and having a few drinks, a lot of drinks, and, waking up in the morning with a colossal hangover. Yeah. And just thinking, do you know what? And go, dancing through the streets, putting a traffic cone on your head, not that we're recommending all of these things. And zeroing yourself. Yeah. And you look at some people, I look at Lando. Oh, sorry, I know we're not talking about racing, but I know Lando sometimes. I think, Lando, son, you need to just zero yourself. Yeah. That's why I felt he was, after the Saudi Grand Prix, my Dutch colleague from Viaplay said to him, by the way, it's King's Day again before Miami, as it is obviously every year. Will you be coming to Amsterdam to celebrate King's Day? And if anybody doesn't know, the King's Day is just one huge party in Amsterdam. Everyone goes and has loads of, Ho Gardens or whatever, and just gets zeros themselves. And Lando said, oh, no, I'm not going to do that this year. I'm in the middle of a championship fight. And I thought, that's because you need to do that. Yeah. Mika Salo came into my head. You need to zero yourself, son, because I think you just need a night out.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, and we're slightly tangent here, but
sorry, yes, that's my fault.
But it's fine. But the idea of in a championship, whoever it is, doing something differently because you're in a championship was always the thing Ron Dennis used to say to us: never do that. Never change your ways because now it matters more. Yeah. You do the same thing that's got you to that point of fighting for a championship. Yeah. And it was particularly pertinent for us on the final day of a season. You'd be on the grid, your driver, for us, it was Mika, first of all, then Kimi, it happened a couple of times, then of course Lewis. And, you're bolting the wheels onto the car or putting the tyres on, and it's your natural thought process is, well, this matters more, so I should check more, or I should be a little bit more diligent in what I'm doing. But the reality is, you do that, you start to introduce new things, mistakes happen. It's about keeping the consistency. So, if Lando's thinking along those lines, there's an argument to say you're changing your approach because in your mind, it matters more, which I can't believe is a good way to look at things. Yeah.
What else has Formula One sort of inspired me? I mean, I love the way, it's all sort of pragmatic and it's instant, like you can change plans very quickly. I'm not talking about plan A, B, and C, but something's not quite right. And this was a kind of Niki Lauda approach to it. Can I do the accent?
Please do.
All right. The late great Nicky Lauda. Well, it's not right. We've got to fix it. Come on. What's going on? We're going on. This is not right. We got to fix it. Okay? We can do that.
That's
and maybe
actually
it's
very
just the
good.
way that his Austrian sort of mindset was. But something's not right. You fix it. You move on.
Yeah.
And if there are any, life lessons that I've learned from people on the F1 side, not necessarily the broadcasting side, it's that it's be flexible, be happy and ready to change plans, be adaptable, be pragmatic with what you're going to do. Look for the sort of quick, low friction way to a solution, or an elegant solution. That's something else I learned from McLaren. Was it Adrian Newey or like Paddy Lowe, or who was it who always after an elegant solution? Or maybe it was Patrick Head.
I think I don't think Adrian Newey is after an elegant solution. He's just after the fastest solution.
The fastest solution.
And elegance doesn't really come into it. It's all about performance with him.
Yeah.
I think other designers do have an opinion that it should look good as well as being fast. I don't think Adrian's necessarily like that.
But then I like to use the word elegant in a sort of extended way to almost the kind of kill two birds with one stone metaphor. It's if you can find a way that solves the problem, looks vague, relatively effortless. Is timely in terms of it doing it at the right time, and it and it not taking very much time, efficient, then that is just a sort of beautiful.
That's the dream.
It's a dream, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it's Formula One that's taught
it's true
us that, and I try to do timely and effortless. Like if we scrunch up a bit of paper from your,
do you want to actually do
from
this?
your thing? No. And there's a waste paper basket over there. Do you take the shot?
Yeah.
Because if you get it in, not only do you look cool, but it's timely because you haven't wasted the time in actually getting up.
Yeah.
And it's looked effortless. And I'm a big fan of elegant solutions and things that are timely and effortless. And I guess I've learnt that from.
That's really interesting. You've also just prompted an interesting analogy, because also in that example you've just given there, throwing the bit of paper, there's a risk element to that.
That you might not get it in.
You might not get it. And then what happens? You get up and go and put it in. But
you would have had to get up and put it in had you not done it in the first place.
Yeah, but you've lost some time now, I guess. It's less efficient.
Yeah,
well, my point is...
Look how cool you would have looked had you got it in.
Yeah, fair.
Sorry, what's your point?
No, the point is, I guess, this idea of risk, because the other thing that I think Formula One has taught me is exactly that if you want to succeed, particularly in a competitive world, in anything, you have to be able to be willing to take risks. And all Formula One teams, certainly the biggest and best ones, are more willing to take risks. And it's been really highlighted to me in recent times, I think, particularly through the Red Bull versus McLaren battle that's been emerging over the, towards the end of Red Bull's dominant period, McLaren now emerging towards the top.
Yeah.
Red Bull being consistent winners seem way more easily readily able to take risks.
Yeah.
Whereas an emerging team, and it is McLaren, but it could be anybody.
Don't call McLaren an emerging team.
Well, emerging in the current era.
Okay.
Emerging from the darkness in the current era.
All right.
Less likely. And I think if you look at that in life, it's fairly representative of anybody who's struggling with maybe confidence, self-belief, all those things.
Yeah.
You're less likely to take risks. And I always think there's always something in Formula One. No matter what you're going through in life, you can look to Formula One for a comparable lesson, I think. And that's just picked out for me, that one. Taking risks, if you want to succeed, it's a non-negotiable thing. You have to be willing to do it. Do you can you relate to that?
Yes, with the condition that if you have to feel safe enough in what you're doing that if the risk doesn't pay off, you're not going to have somebody knocking at your door saying, well, that was so rubbish, you're out.
But that comes from the self-belief or self-confidence.
Yeah, sure. But, a most recent example I can think of is when in China or Japan, they asked me to do the grid walk. Japan. They asked me to do the grid walk with Jacques Villeneuve. Mm-hmm. And the grid walk is Martin Brundle's thing. So instantly I'm like, okay, look, don't call it grid walk. I'll do a bit on the grid. If you want someone to do a bit on the grid, fill some time. So in Azerbaijan last year, Jacques was also our guest. And I love Jacques Villeneuve. He was my first world champion in 97. Yeah. And I think one always has a soft spot for the first world champion. Even though yours was Schumacher, but I'm sure you still have.
Well, it was Mika, actually.
99.
Because he was champion when I arrived at the team.
Oh, I see what you mean. Yes.
In my world, that was,
okay. Yeah. And so I love doing stuff with Jacques Villeneuve. So in Azerbaijan last year, we did Jacques Villeneuve's honest reviews, like an internet thing, like a sort of Amazon, honest reviews, product reviews. And the idea was to go through the grid and he would give an honest review of each driver's either qualifying or how the team are going at the moment or whatever it was. So we'd done that. And then they kept going on about grid walk. Mm-hmm. And I had this idea and I thought, what if we don't walk at all? And they were like, right. And so that was a risk. I mean, I didn't think it was much of a risk. It's only 8 minutes of telly, but the risk is that you're going to look stupid and not deliver a very good product, which is your job.
So how do you weigh that up in your mind? What process do you go through?
So the way I weighed it up in my mind was, I had a little one of those dog coming out the pond moments, and I thought, what is the grid? And I actually thought back to a TV person who's inspired me, Steve Ryder. Yeah, the great Steve Ryder, still knocking it out the park on the British Touring Car Championship on ITV4. And he always talked about the grid in terms of it is a microcosm. It is the epicenter of Formula One. And for that half an hour, and they've realized this Formula One, which is why they've gradually spread the grid longer and longer and longer. Feels like sometimes, well, it is 40 minutes now, but it feels like an hour sometimes, the amount of standing around. It is the epicenter of Formula One in that moment. Mm. Everybody is there. All the drivers, all the team bosses, well, the drivers aren't, they're gone. Part of the loss of the magic of the grid. But it is the epicenter of Formula One. It's the epitome of what Formula One stands for. It's the middle of, and how many sports have that every week? And that's why the likes of Christian Horner talk about every match is a cup final. When both the teams are on the pitch, maybe it's your anthem, or maybe it's the sort of pre-match in an NFL game, or there aren't too many sports who do that. And then I thought about having not the grid walk. It's always not the grid walk because I can't hope to do what Martin does. So we thought we'd do a grid stand or just not walk very much. We'd stand in the epicenter of Formula One and let the camera go and look at Verstappen on one side, Piastri on the other side.
Let it happen around you.
Let it happen around me, point out bits. And it was widely regarded as a nice try, but didn't really work. But what I was happy with, and it's important, taking it as far as taking a risk, it was a risk. To do a grid walk where you're not walking, there are these two guys who do the Dirty Air podcast. Can I talk about that? Alfie Brown and... his name escapes me. Anyway, and they do a grid walk review. I'm a subscriber to the podcast. It's brilliant. And they think I'm an idiot, which is fine by me, because I am. And they do a grid walk review. And normally, like Brundle, if it's a terrible grid walk, they'll give him like a 4 or a 5. Or if it's a good grid walk, like last week, they'll give him a 7 or an 8. Yeah. They gave mine and Jack's grid walk a -7. So absolutely tore it to pieces. But you know what? I thought it's worth a try.
Well, of course it is.
I was ridiculed by people I respect and like and think are funny. Josh Weller and Alfie Brown, so I've remembered his name. And it was a risk. But if I had thought that taking that risk of doing a grid not walk would either land me in hot water with my bosses or get me the sack, then I would never have done it.
No, sure. Yeah.
But that's in itself in Formula One is, it's pretty rare. If you take a big risk and it turns out badly and you've only got yourself to blame, isn't that trouble?
Yes.
Is that why people don't tend to take risks?
Well, I think people do take risks inside Formula One. I think it's much more prevalent. I mean, if you think about it, every single thing we bring to a car in terms of an upgrade, there's an element of risk. Less so now because we can simulate to such high levels. We have a very good idea of how that component's going to affect the car, hopefully in a positive sense. But certainly go back a few years, it wasn't the case at all. You'd be making parts. The first time you really find out is when you bolt it onto a car and see how quickly it goes. But we're innovating constantly. Innovation in itself is always taking risks because no one's done it before. So I think that's this hotbed of Formula One that we've been around for so long, certainly in my world, has broken down barriers to taking risks for me. It means that if something doesn't work out, if I take a risk, it doesn't work out like you've just described, I don't see that as the end of the world. I'm always looking, well, okay, if it's not the end of the world, if it doesn't work out because it's a learning process, I'll figure out a better way or whatever. But if I don't try, for me, the risk is not trying. Certainly in Formula One's competitive industry, if you don't take the risk, that's the risk because others will and you'll get left behind. So I think that's an interesting observation.
It's where you need a good boss and a good corporate structure around you who will not come down on you and say...
I think Formula One's so good at that. I do. I think the teams, at least, are very, very good at what they call it psychological safety. Yeah. Creating that environment.
The best teams are.
Of course, not everybody.
Find some, not everybody.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Right, look, we're going to rapidly run out of time. So there's a couple of things I want to... No, it's great. A couple of things I want to ask you. First of all, you've been doing this for a long time, as you said, and typically it's been pretty much the same role over those 20 odd years for a number of different broadcasters, but it's been the same role. Yeah.
Mr. Kravitz, why have you had no career progression for 20 years?
Sort of. It's not that it's not career progression.
No, I've had no career progression.
Yeah, but that must be a conscious, deliberate effort. You must love what you do, I guess, is where we're coming to.
Yeah.
And is that it? There's nothing that you would want to move on to inside the Formula One broadcasting world? Because I presume if there was, you'd have done it by now.
Yeah. I don't want to be a commentator. No. I'd be terrible. I'd be sacked within 6 minutes. I would say something terrible about, Eric Boulier. And I don't want to be a presenter. I tried that. I'm not the world's worst presenter, but I'm close. So, talking about how great, you look at what Steve Ryder does. And of course, Jake Humphrey, Simon Lazenby, and we know what good presenters are, and they are technically Georgie Thompson, Natalie Pinkham. They're technically brilliant, and they have a kind of certain way of thinking that I just can't. I can't do that. I can hold half an hour's worth of information in my head and deliver it with the help of a notebook into a camera on a one take. On a oneer, but I can't do what a presenter does, so I don't really want to do that because I've seen how good they are, and I can't be doing that. What else would I do?
No, it's fair.
Do I want to work for Formula One? Do I want to work for the FIA? Do I want to work for a team? I'd quite like to be an air traffic controller.
So that was going to be the next part of this. Would you
for Heathrow Airport?
Yeah,
at Heathrow Airport.
So if it was going to be another industry, it would be the aviation industry.
Yeah, it would.
Okay, interesting. All right.
But there's something about the Formula One mindset and what you do and what we're talking about, which kind of drives me crazy. About you see big kind of decisions in what you're doing and the lives that we lead and the services we use that haven't been given the Formula One treatment and the mindset, and whether it's an elegant solution here or a different way of thinking or taking a risk. And you know this, heaven knows you know this more than me, but it must drive you completely crazy.
It does.
The amount,
It does.
you're just thinking, look, if we just changed one thing or even a mindset and just, let's get this, it would make things 3,000%
I find it impossible to have a set of builders or tradespeople at my house,
right?
Because in my mind, they will never match up to the sort of standards that I think are normal,
Right.
but most people don't. And I think that is the privileged existence that we've all had inside this world. It's become normal to many of us, hasn't it? I hope we don't take it for granted, but it certainly has become our everyday. And you step out of it into the real world, people don't operate to that level on a normal, consistent basis. And I think it's so special about this industry.
Yes. And we're all different. I mean, you could make an MP4 stroke 12 and 11 out of your own hands. You can build up the whole car. What was your favorite MP4 stroke?
Oh,
and are you sad they don't call it the MP4 strokes
I am a little
anymore?
bit. Yeah. The 19B was that? No, 17, MP4 17.
Okay. Oh, yeah.
Kimi Räikkönen's.
Right.
I think it was 2003. Does that ring a bell?
Insanely complicated, although probably not as complicated as they are now.
No.
But you can do that.
Yeah.
So I couldn't do what you do, but I see processes and ways of communication and things like for example, how many times, you might not know it, but when you get a long flight and the plane comes and it's just about to make what they call at Air France le dernier tour, like they announce it, like last virage, dernier virage.
Yeah.
If you're on Air France, the captain or the first officer will always say to the cabin crew, they'll always announce last turn.
Yeah. Okay.
Which I think is interesting because it's telling them that they're pulling onto the gate or the stand, and they should be ready to disarm the doors and automatic manual and stuff like that. So they don't have to worry about they can get up or take their seatbelts off because they're only going in a straight line and stopping. So there is a thing called an automatic guidance device at Heathrow, predominantly. And I know this because I went to visit the tower a few months ago. And these automatic guidance devices, rather than having a marshaller coming on there, or it's a safety thing, and it means that you can do away with paying a human to do it.
I got stuck on the runway for half an hour last week when it wasn't working.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. Because these guidance things, they're not working.
Yeah.
And the pilot says, look, well, I can't go in. They don't allow me to go in because this guidance thing isn't on. So you're looking left and you're looking right. There's not a baggage. So all the baggage guys are waiting. There's not somebody you're about to run over with the engine. You're not about to hit a baggage cart. It's just that there's been a link in the chain where someone hasn't turned this thing on. Now, look, we can all understand, but Formula One process would just be what's effortless and timely and an elegant solution. Yeah. Do you know what? Just keep going. Yeah. Just stop.
Hit the brakes when you need to.
Hit the brakes when you need to. Maybe you're not exactly on the line, but the guy with the air bridge, you can trust them to do their job brilliantly. And everyone's going to make their connection that way. You're not going to get the company late or anything like that. And it must drive you crazy. Third runway at Heathrow. Another thing. Sorry.
and another.
And another thing. There's been no sort of Formula One thinking applied to what is the only deliverable solution to bearing in mind the costs, which a third runway at Heathrow is so costly. They're putting aside all the other environmental reasons why it's probably never going to happen. The airlines don't want to pay for it. Yeah. No one wants to pay for it because they're gonna destroy a village, paper over the M25, which they probably have to do anyway. But no one's actually thought about the airplanes themselves in a technical way. And so there's this great idea called Heathrow Hub, which I used to do going back to the beginning. I used to do a podcast called I can't remember the name. It was going to call the Doors to Automatic, but it was called The Aviator. That's it. It's called The Aviator. And we spoke to this Concorde pilot called Jock Lowe, and he'd come up with this idea. He said, look, the runways at Heathrow are relics of a bygone age in aviation where VC-10s Concorde needed 4 kilometers, 4,000 meters of runway.
Yeah.
Right? Not even an A380 needs an A380. Look at Gatwick's runway. It's 2 kilometers or just over. That has Emirates A380s in all the time. It's very, very rare that an aircraft, a modern aircraft with efficient engines, is going to need more than 2,000 meters, 2 kilometers of runway. So what you do is that you divide the northern runway into 2. The northern runway is the longest. So 27 right if you're looking at it with your back towards London.
Yeah.
9 left if you're looking at it with your back towards
Windsor.
Windsor.
4,000 meters.
It's the 4,000 meters.
Make it into 2.
You divide
2,000.
it into 2,000, and you use it for the short haul planes.
Yeah.
Which are, I think, at least half of what Heathrow. All the Europeans, the Irish carriers, the flights to anywhere in a 3-hour. I mean, we have short haul, we have narrow body. Use it for narrow bodies.
Yeah.
JetBlue flies a narrow body to New York, but they only need 1,600 meters.
Sounds like a Formula One solution.
It's a Formula One solution because what it means is that there's no new noise for anybody because you're not putting in a third runway with its own flight path in and flight path out. You're just using the same noise. There's no new noise, and I don't know why.
Have you been on to them, Ted? Because...
What am I going to call Keir Starmer? What am I going to...
We'll try and get you someone to speak to.
But it's not my idea. It's the idea of an ex-Concorde pilot who knows his onions.
Yeah.
But it drives me crazy that when nobody is thinking, you just write. So you have those 2 runways. So you have people landing on that one. Sorry.
For those who are listening and not watching this, right. Ted is trying to articulate using a pen and some cups. This is very Ted's notebook.
You have people, short haul flights, your 777s, your A380s. On a hot day, they might need 2.5.
Yeah.
Or your 747s don't really come into Heathrow anymore, and they can use the southern runway. That's fine. That's plenty long enough. They can do that. So you're landing into that runway. They're getting off there. There's a soft concrete overrun area between the 2 northerly runways, which if you put your wheels into it, it will stop you.
Like a gravel trap.
It's called EMAS. It's like a sort of soft. It's like quicksand or a gravel trap. Is this
something we should employ around tracks in Formula One?
Well, it would stop them quite quickly, quicker than
a bit too
quicker than gravel traps. But that kind of thing. So you have a safety zone there, and then they leave the same terminals and go off and take off.
It's just about efficiency of planning and timing. And McLaren it's a very interesting idea, and I can see, and it is very Formula One. McLaren did a project a few years ago now with Heathrow, and maybe in Gatwick as well, and it was using their simulation software to move planes on the ground in a more efficient manner. And that, the idea being, if you can simulate all of these planes, and where they are, you can move them in a much more efficient way, saving millions and time and all this stuff. And it's just the way that Formula One teams think, isn't it? And it's just applying that to other areas of life. And I think that what you and I have both experienced is that it's affected the way we think because we've been immersed in it for so long. We may not be going to those levels of detail, but it becomes frustrating when others don't seem to think in that way because to us it's a lot more obvious. I think that's one of the things, one of the things that for me has rubbed off on me, and it must be the same for I think anybody who works in this industry. We've covered cheese and aeroplanes and runways.
Third runway. It's the only, do you know what? It's the only the only frustration is that and I'm half expecting somebody deep within the Department for Transport or in the Labour government to sort of let it all blow over, and then come in and say, actually, I've got the only politically deliverable solution for a third runway. Yeah. And it means no new noise for anybody. And it's much cheaper because all you have to do is separate those 2 runways out. You might still need to tunnel over the M25.
But still way cheaper.
But way cheaper than demolishing the poor village of Sibson or whatever it is, and then building this and another terminal. Because Heathrow's 99% full at the moment, isn't it? It always has been, or since the recovery from COVID. And so you just need the sort of relief of that. And any environmental concerns can be offset by the fact you haven't got people circling around 4 stacks
Of course,
of
yeah.
Lambourne, Biggin Hill, Ockham, and
Can you
Brooklands
imagine if the whole world thought like Formula One?
well, this is what you're doing.
But imagine if it did. It can never happen, of course.
Well,
But imagine if it. What a different world we'd live in. Anyway, listen, we're rabbiting on now, and I know you've got to head off. So, a couple of quick questions. What happens to all the notebooks?
I throw them away.
Do you really? You don't keep them all?
No.
Do you ever go back and look at them?
I do sometimes. Do you know what? I found one the other day. I was just clearing out some boxes, old Autosports and stuff like that. I found a West McLaren Mercedes one.
Did you?
Yeah, I did. And I chucked it.
Did you look at it first, though?
I did, but I didn't have. Some I keep if I think they're going to be interesting or useful, or if I can give them away to anybody who wants them.
Yeah.
I might have to keep them because as a competition for a book that I'm writing, I might need them, but we'll get onto that.
We will get onto that.
But mostly they go in the recycling.
One more before we talk about the book. Have you got any amazing bits of memorabilia that you've collected over the years? Has anyone given you anything, or have you collected anything that's really special?
No, we like to keep clutter to a minimum in my house.
Very Formula One.
Yeah, I even chucked away I had a little die-cast model of a 767 that I chucked away the other day.
What about your race suits? Because you used to get fireproof suits.
Yeah,
Pitlane, didn't you?
No. There's one. I've kept my first ITV one because it was really nice and baggy, Jacques Villeneuve style. Because when we did the Malaysian Grand Prix, they fitted me out for one. It was like perfect fitted. I didn't look. They said, "Do you remember Bruno Vaglienti from
Yeah, the name rings a bell.
From Spark? Was he Sparko, or he was from Sparko?
Oh yeah, the little rep that used to get around.
The rep. And Bruno, when he kitted me out for my first fire suit, and he said, "So you have a choice. You want to look like model, or you want to look like racing driver?" And I was like, "I don't know, Bruno. I mean, both." And he's like, "Okay, racing driver, then you have it a bit baggy." But I used to like. At the Malaysian races, I had a little radio belt, which I still use, survived 20 years. And I used to stuff the inside of the fire suit with drinks.
Did you?
Yeah, so I'd have like one bottle of...
That was why it was baggy.
Yeah, it was baggy. So I'd have like stuff in there. So I kept the ITV one, but all the rest of them...
that point of model or racing driver, you know that the racing drivers have a special suit for the photos pre-season that is tighter.
Really?
So they look a bit... buff. I know this for a fact because I've seen it happening, and it's just for the photo shoot. Then they bin that and get the actual one, which is baggier.
Which is baggier. So I don't really have that. I did in this box that I was sorting out. I had the Autosport from Death in Imola.
Oh yeah.
It just said Death in Imola, and I kept the Richard Williams, who's my favourite sports writer, ex of the Guardian, now does various freelance stuff. His writing, his Senna obit, because obviously I was, as I said, I was a big Senna fan.
Yeah.
Kept some of that, but no. BAR.
Paddock passes.
Yes, they are in a box somewhere.
Yeah.
But I don't know why I keep them.
Anything from drivers? Do you get anything signed or
no?
No, because you're not a big selfie guy. Although you have taken a few on the notebook.
I have. Not a big selfie guy. Any merch like I get. So at the recent Ferrari thing, when they were introducing Lewis Hamilton to the Tifosi in Milan, they had a box full of caps that they hadn't managed to distribute to some of the sponsors. And they kindly gave me one, and I gave one to a friend whose son is a huge Ferrari fan.
Yeah, great.
So
okay.
They come in, they sit in my house for about a few weeks, and then they go out.
So the memories are enough.
We don't keep. There is a poster. I have Imola did a very good poster recently, a few years ago, which is kind of the only F1 poster I've got in my house. Yeah.
Well, talking of memories, they're clearly a big part of it, because if you don't need things to remind you, they must all be in here somewhere, a lot of it. A lot of it is now no longer just in there, because as you've dropped some absolute bombshell hints recently, you've been writing a book.
I have. It's been a busy winter.
Well, tell us about that, because that, I'm sure, is very exciting for a lot of people.
So it's called It's called F1 Insider: Notes from the Pit Lane. Snappy title, and it's out in September. And at the kind of celebration of, well, not a celebration, but as Formula One is in its 75th year, it's kind of collection of the best stories from the world of Formula One in the last 30 years that I've been doing it, and my view of it.
Amazing.
Some of which we've discussed here today. Things I've learned off drivers, off team bosses, from the broadcasting side. Big moments. We talk about Jerez 97 with Schumacher and Villeneuve, and there are 2 chapters about Michael Schumacher actually, and what I learned about him, both in terms of the application of obvious genius with the sort of balance of having a completely ruthless side but the humanity of the guy as well, and the personal relationships, and just how he made it work so well for him. Such an inspirational guy, and having to work so much on my side. I've never had to work so hard as a reporter in thinking about questions and thinking about my approach than when interviewing Michael Schumacher.
Because he was so super intelligent himself. And
he demanded excellence from you as well.
Yeah.
He thought, you know what? This isn't going to make my car go quicker. I understand why I have to do this media stuff.
Yeah.
But if I'm going to do it, by gosh, you better be good. And you better give me stuff to think about that might help me as well.
Has anyone else done that since? No.
Very, very rare.
Yeah, that's
I can probably think maybe Sebastian.
Yeah.
Lewis to a certain degree.
Fernando
will think in terms of how can I use this opportunity to further my own ends, whatever they are.
Yeah.
A message to the team, a destabilizing of an opponent, or just to sort of mess around and have fun and have a laugh.
Which is also clever and intelligent in its own way.
Sure.
Yeah.
But nobody other than Schumacher has made me work so hard on my craft, which is inspirational.
That is inspirational,
in a way. Yeah. So there are a couple of, I talk about that in the book, a couple of chapters on Michael, one of his Ferrari time, and then one in those years off he had, the motorbike crash that meant that his return was interrupted. He was going to fill in for Felipe Massa after he had the incident in Hungary with the spring.
Yeah.
Off the back of the Brawn, all these stories.
Wow,
the 6-car race in Indianapolis.
Remember it well.
Crashgate 2008, which I'm sure you also remember as well. So it's a sort of collection of Abu Dhabi. There's a chapter on Abu Dhabi 21.
Of course, you could not write a book without that. I mean, there's so much that's happened.
Few people have written about a proper examination of Abu Dhabi 21.
Yeah.
With actually a conclusion that you might not expect.
Interesting. Okay. And so it's out in September.
F1 Insider. Yep. And the pre-orders, whoever pre-orders it, whenever we get around to actually putting it on sale, will get one of my old, unexpurgated, unabridged, unredacted notebooks.
Fantastic.
So as a competition, if you pre-order, you can win one of my notebooks. That's going back to what I do with them.
Yeah.
So we're going to give an actual notebook. Gosh, I better not put any.
I think that's. Do you know what? The book is going to be amazing because over that 30-year period, not only has the sport changed beyond recognition in so many different ways, going from the sort of Bernie era into what we have now. What's required of a driver is completely different. The Netflix generation is another element to this, but also going way back to when you started. And in that period of the 2000s where I was involved, there were some really controversial stories. The Spygate, the Crashgate, all of the... I mean, Spygate in itself could be a movie, couldn't it, that whole year? So there's so much to write about. The content must be absolutely... You must have had to pick which bits to sort of put in and leave out. Yeah.
It's... I mean, Spygate, from our point of view, was like the proverbial frog being boiled in a warm, because it started cold.
Yeah.
And then do you remember it's easy to look back on Spygate now. And my old colleague Sarah Holt did a series on BBC Sounds with
I was in
Tong.
it.
Yes,
I was in it.
Of course.
Yeah.
Which is very good on Spygate.
Yeah, it's good.
Very good. Enjoyed that a lot. And But you could only do that looking back on it. At
Yeah.
the time, do you remember? It just came out bit by bit.
Yeah, true. Well, I was in it and I didn't see it coming.
But
until it was too late.
Little details like the all the stuff that Stepney, Nigel Stepney had, and then but we were getting there, and I was in some of those. I was in that meeting, that World Council meeting where McLaren got off first time, and the rage on Jean Tot's face. And it's only when you look back on it now, and we did an interview with him, he asked to be interviewed, and he said, we were not discussed. We all thought, oh, well, Ron's said that it didn't go beyond a few people, blah, blah, blah. It's probably okay. It seems proportionate. Max Mosley couldn't prove much of it. It was, we didn't know how the story was going to change as it was happening, as the water was getting warmer and the frog was boiling.
That's right.
And only now you look back on it. So, but I'm telling the story as it was at the time, because that's the only thing I can do.
Yeah.
And I'm telling these stories how they felt at the time from us reporting it. And I became the kind of Spygate and the sort of Singapore Crashgate correspondent, because I'm the kind of news reporter figure. And what annoyed me sometimes, and I write about this in the book, is that sometimes people just refer to it as F1 politics.
Yeah,
some of
so
these
much
things.
more.
It
was so much more than that, wasn't it? It was personal. It was political, but it was also sporting.
Yeah,
it was competitive. It was about getting one up over the competition. I mean, I just think it's not just that story, but that was amazing. But that was that era. There was so much of that going on. The competitive element, which nowadays we think about of just being on track, it was so much more. It's not even just the technical side. It was the human side, the political element of that, and the managerial combatants that were taking each other on. It's fantastic. So I cannot wait to read the book. That sounds like it's going to be great. Yeah, no. So it's watch out. If you do want to find out what is in the notebooks, then if you get a pre-order, then that'll be F1 Insider. Great.
Out in September.
Coming in September. Well,
I don't even have anything to hold up. Normally when people do these plugging things,
I know.
Just finished it.
Yeah, well, keep your eye out. You can't miss it. It'll be all over the place when it comes out, I've no doubt. Ted, I need to say a huge thank you.
I did refer to the mechanic actually from some source material.
Did you?
Not stuff about Kimi Räikkönen. But there was some to get your insight in there as well.
Oh, thank you.
Was really interesting.
Well, I look forward to it, as I'm sure everyone does. I've been looking forward to today for quite some time, because it's actually very rare that we get to hear anything from you outside of literally reporting, from a Formula One pit lane.
Well,
and it's
disappointed you.
No, you haven't at all. It's been an absolute privilege. I think you're someone who's been around for so long, and as you said right at the beginning of this, the thing that keeps you going, the thing that drives you to work as hard as you do, is that you have this unbelievable empathy with the person watching from the other end of that TV camera. And that comes across in your sort of honesty, the lengths you're willing to go to get that right answer that people need. And I think the sport is undoubtedly a better place for having to do that for so many years.
Well, it's very kind of you to say, because I am that person.
Yeah, well, of course. And that's why it works.
The 4 races I do of the year, I am that person. Yeah. And I used to be that person.
Yeah.
So that's why.
Well, there you go. Well, it comes across, it works. I think it's always good to sort of review yourself. And so doing that although you're not reviewing yourself when you're watching at home, actually do you review yourself?
Yeah, of course. That's the only way you learn.
You go back and watch.
You have to watch. Always have done.
There you go.
Used to go back to, after in the ITV days, I go back to North One in Islington and just watch tapes back.
Yeah.
Because also you will do, so on the weekend, was it Martin did a whole interview with Charles Leclerc?
Yeah.
It's a 12-minute interview. We only used 4.5 minutes of it.
Yeah, of course.
Think about all the gold that's in the rest of it.
Yeah,
you need to know. You can refer back to that.
Well, and
so you have to go back and watch it.
Watch
everything again.
It's a very Formula One thing to do, isn't it? We review ourselves because that's where the opportunities are buried deep in. Unless you look for them, you often don't find them. So,
well, listen, thank you very much. I don't take praise very well, as you can tell. So,
it's been a pleasure.
I'd rather not hear it, but
all right. Well, we'll leave it there. But thank you, mate. I do appreciate it, and I'll see you in Miami.
Yeah.
I don't know about you, but I absolutely loved that conversation. I could have gone on literally for hours and hours. There are so many things I wanted to ask him that we didn't get time for, but the content that was in it I thought was packed full of really useful takeaways. Ted has had such an interesting journey through this sport, And for him to sit and share so many little insights from that, I think is truly valuable. There will, of course, be a link to that McLaren documentary that he mentioned in the show. I'll pop that in the show notes because that's really interesting. And of course, keep an eye out for that brilliant book coming your way in September. In the meantime, though, until we meet again, remember this: do the right things, do the things right.